surprisingly often actually ask me what Formula 1 teams get up to when there's no racing happening, like now, the off-season. Once you finish the last race, does everyone just shut down holiday, 4 months off, 5 months off? Must be brilliant, what are you going to do? That's not how it is. Yes, of course they do get time to take some holidays, and loo days of course, that they might have accrued over the course of a long season of working many weekends. But it's not a 4-month holiday. When the cars get back from the last race, everything will be completely stripped down into minute individual parts. It'll be inspected, repaired, anything that's damaged over the course of the season, sent away for their sort of rebuild, and then it'll all get archived and put into storage, because lots of those cars from 2017, even though they won't be used in 2018, will be rebuilt, be repainted in the 2018 livery when that's unveiled, and used as show cars for various events and various sponsor events and various demonstrations. So it's not like they get back from 2017 and put that car in the bin. It still has some life left in it, even if it's not racing. The team's trucks will be emptied and cleaned out and inspected. Basically everything has a winter rebuild, a winter rejuvenation, so that you're set and ready again for when the new season does come around, because by the time you get to the start of the new season there is no time for any of this nice housekeeping type work, so that all has to be done over the course of the winter. And whilst the race team of course do get to take their long overdue holidays once the season has finished, there's lots of parts of the factory that are very busy and have been for months by that point, designing, manufacturing the thousands and thousands of parts that it takes to make up a new Formula 1 car. Once everyone's had their Christmas turkey and their Christmas holidays are all done, they come back in January, and that is really when things, for the race team at least, really start to get busy. Maybe not for the first week or so, depending on how the team's schedule's doing in terms of manufacture, but from January into February. Don't forget the first test is at the end of February in Barcelona this year, so things up until that point, between Christmas and the time the team's trucks leave for Barcelona, it's pretty busy. It's a pretty deep puddle. All the equipment that the team uses in and around the garage, things like front and rear jacks, things like the stands that the cars sit on, the banner work that goes around the sides of the garage with all the sponsors' logos on, everything changes, certainly at the bigger teams. Some of the smaller teams will carry a lot over, but think about it, front jacks have to be matched to the new front wing of the car. Same with the rear jacks, have to be matched to the lifting point that's on the crash structure at the back of the car. Those things change between seasons, so therefore the jacks have to be adapted as well. All of the fans that you see the guys putting into the front brake ducts, the rear brake ducts, radiator ducts on the side of the car, all of those fans again have to be shaped, have to have new parts made to fit the new season's chassis design. So there's plenty to keep them busy. Each mechanic has a drawer inside the team's sort of tool chest, the Lister cabinet if you like, that rolls out, and inside that drawer is a tray, and that tray is a source of pride for most Formula 1 mechanics. You know, it's got to be meticulously arranged and organised and look spotless and have everything in it that you need where you want it. It's got to be there when you want it. And over the course of the winter there's time for a full rebuild of those things as well. It's about to get muddy. Look at this. Now, I think I might have just learnt that my right welly has got a hole in it, because now my sock is cold and wet, and I'm pretty sure full of disgusting mud. So that's nice. Bloody love these wellies as well. You city folk, you won't get this, right? I've lived in the city for years, but I moved out to the country a few years ago, and now my favourite piece of footwear are these wellies. They're like so comfortable, and I don't want to get rid of them. But if they've got a hole in, they're not really an awful lot of good. The cars all have what they call a sort of travel kit, which is a big sort of protective frame generally made out of wood or steel, that bolts onto the Formula 1 car and completely surrounds it for when the thing's travelling to long haul races and going into the F1 freight. It just stops any of the very delicate parts of an F1 car being damaged in transit. But again, that piece of kit has to be fully customised and designed to fit the fixing points on a new Formula 1 car. Another part that has to be made, and can only be made once the actual Formula 1 car exists. Extractor fans for the cars, hydraulic rigs, travel boxes for front and rear wings, and other spares that are going to be manufactured, refuelling rigs. They all need to have some way of travelling and something to live inside to protect them. All of these things need manufacturing, making sure that the livery matches the livery of the car or the team's livery for that year. If they've got sponsors' logos on, they need to be the correct sponsors' logos. Come on, come on, come here. When the mechanics do finally get their hands on the first chassis, when it gets pushed around from the carbon shop and into the race bays where the mechanics work. In fact, the first chassis that the mechanics see is actually normally chassis 02 rather than chassis 01, because 01 is the chassis that has to go and do all the FIA crash tests. So that one's been battered and bruised and generally won't be one of the first race cars. So chassis 02 gets pushed around and the mechanics finally get their hands on it, get familiar with it, start to see what they've got to work with for the year, start to be able to offer up new parts to it that they've been given, see how they fit. They'll start to gradually pre-fit things like steering and suspension components. There are lots and lots of little details that you never see on a Formula 1 car. It can be a slow and painful process in the beginning because things don't fit first time round. You know, these are not parts that have been bought off a shelf. It's a prototype. It's a constantly evolving prototype. So all of these parts are being fitted for the first time around now by the mechanics in most Formula 1 teams, and they don't always fit first time, which means they need some modification. They need fettling, fitting and then taking out again. It's not uncommon to get, you know, a whole front end of a chassis built up finally with new components, only to have to strip it all apart again to go and have the chassis modified somehow, to have the components tweaked or remade even. Things don't always work first time, even though the accuracy level within a Formula 1 team is incredible. It is incredible. And given the number of parts and the time frame that they're having to manufacture these things in, it genuinely is incredible. But every now and again, things just don't work first time, and it's a frustrating part of the job, frustrating time of year. Lots of late nights going on at the moment, but that is the role of a Formula 1 mechanic. Even once the whole car has been built up to a certain level with all its components in, making sure everything works and fits and operates as it should, quite often the whole thing will then have to be completely stripped apart to send the chassis away for painting. That's one of the last operations that happens, is the chassis gets painted in its new livery, then it gets rebuilt again, then it goes off for photographs in a professional studio that the marketing guys can use for promotions. Then it heads off to that very first test where you and I and the rest of the world will finally get to see the very first iteration of the 2018 Formula 1 cars. Something that's definitely new for all teams this year, of course, and significant, is the introduction of the halo. You know, I joked about it being ugly in yesterday's vlog, and you know, that's how I feel. I don't like the look of it at all, but it's here to stay, and I also have no doubt that we will not be talking about it for very long. I think if we get good racing, the halo will be something that will just drift into unfortunate normality. However, for the teams who have got to design and manufacture the chassis and then get them through the stringent crash tests and static impact, static load tests that the Halo has to now pass, it's a tough challenge. They got the go-ahead that the Halo was being introduced very late in the day, in the middle of 2017, when really they wanted that to happen right at the beginning of the process. actually it has a big impact on what the teams do and how they manufacture the car. The halo is a heavy sort of carbon fibre and metallic object, as you know, bolted onto the top of the chassis, but the chassis has to be completely different in its manufacture to be able to take the loads. The static load test that the halo has to go through is kind of like a hydraulic ram ramming into the halo from the side, as if a sort of a wheel assembly has bounced across the track and hit. The halo then is supposed to deflect the tyre or the object, deform, but the chassis has to stay completely intact. The chassis cannot be damaged in any way, and that means it's got to be pretty bloody strong. And to make something that strong to take those kind of loads, sideways loads, from lots of different angles of course as well, 3 different mounting points on the halo, is not an easy challenge, and it means that you've got to add significant weight, significant components into the makeup of the carbon fibre chassis to be able to support those loads and to be able to mount that halo in a way where it will deform the right ways. The weight that adds to the whole Formula 1 car for 2018 is significant. The regulations changed to accommodate this, but the regulations have increased the minimum weight of the car by 6 kilos. The halo itself weighs around 9 kilos. With all the mountings and everything else, you could be talking up to something like 15 kilos of extra weight. So teams now have to find significant weight savings right across the car to try and accommodate for that. It's going to put a premium on drivers who are not very heavy. We're going to have the drivers who are tall and heavy at a disadvantage, the teams who can't afford to spend huge amounts of money on saving weight to adapt to all of this at a disadvantage. And surely these are all the types of things that we're trying to avoid now in Formula 1, aren't they? This way, Wilson. This way. Oh, come on. Can you get through? God, you get stuck. There we go. We're going to have a number of teams who are going to struggle to make the minimum weight limit and therefore be able to use ballast in their cars. Putting ballast in your car is a big advantage, because you can move that ballast around to play with the weight distribution of your car to make it handle in the best way that's possible. If you're stuck with a car that's already above the minimum weight limit, you can't move anything around. You can't use that as one of the tools in your armoury, if you like, in terms of making the car better over a race weekend. I know that the teams have had discussions about raising the weight limit even higher, but of course the teams who are at an advantage, the teams who have the money to save weight and who don't see this as a competitive advantage for themselves, they don't want to change the regs. They're quite happy. They know they can get under their weight limit and add some ballast to the car. This is one of the problems we have in Formula 1. Nobody can ever agree on anything.